G'day everyone, welcome back to another live hangout here at Voice Essentials. I hope you are all having a safe and comfortable time of it. I say comfortable because it is quite cool here in Brisbane, Australia. And I say that recognizing that I did just catch the news prior to starting the show, and I happened to see the national weather for Australia, and I noticed that Linda currently is existing in a maximum of 11 degrees Celsius, which I believe is quite cool for Hobart this time of year. So Linda, I hope you're warm. It has been free. We had our coldest night of the year last night. It got down to single digits. I know for all of those of you who live in very much colder parts of the world, you go single digits, come on. But we're not built for it up here. We're in the subtropics. Like, what is this single digit bit? Okay, so wherever you are, I can see that Jenny is saying it's very, very hot in Canada at the moment, and yes, melting above 30 degrees for Kelly, who's also in Canada. So I hope you're able to shelter appropriately from whether it's cold or hot or whatever it is. I hope that you can be comfortable. There's that word again, comfortable. Today we are looking at a mini topic. We're going to be talking about genres. You know, you hear me a lot here on the channel. You hear me talk about the fact that I teach rock, pop, country, indie, and I often will I just say that. And I was thinking the other day, do you know what? I don't think I've ever taken the time to define those for you. What is it about those different genres that separate them vocally? And so we're going to talk a bit about that. We are only going to scratch the surface of all of that, but we're going to go through 5 different genres today, and we're going to look at, you know, what defines the genre, some of the artists that perhaps are a part of those genres, because all of you want to sing in very specific areas, very specific genres. And so we're going to talk about some of the key vocal characteristics that you need to be attentive to for your chosen genre. I thought that would be a good thing to do. We'll do that in a moment. Before we do, just to let you know, after we've done the mini talk, because I'm going to move at pace. I don't want the entire show to be a mini topic, which I'm going to try and get to Q&A, some of your questions after the show. Sorry, after the mini topic, and hopefully we'll have time to do that. So if you have questions, throw them up into the chat, and Linda will grab them and put them in the very live document that we have going. And of course, if I don't get to your questions today, next week we're going to do another Q&A, and where we dedicate the whole session to Q&A. And the week after that, we're going to be having a friend of mine, Tracey Osmond. She runs quite a large, very successful singing school, if you will, private singing school, up in Townsville, about 2 days drive from where I am going north. And she's up in the tropics, not just the subtropics. It gets warm up there. So anyway, we're going to have Tracey come onto the show next week, and we're going to be talking with her about her lived experience of voice damage. And she very much got into teaching voice and exploring voice anatomy and all those things by virtue of her own damaged voice. She's got a really powerful story, and I'm hoping you don't miss that, because I think whilst it's one of recognizing the damage, it's also one of tremendous hope, and a real insight into just how, you know, you can travel the journey of voice damage and come out the other end really successfully. And so we're definitely going to do that in a couple of weeks' time when we have Tracey onto the show. But I really want to get into the live hangout now. So let's do that. And I've got to do that, I've got to do this. So here we go. We're going to explore the genres in singing. As I said, we're going to cover 5 genres today. We're going to cover rock. We're going to cover pop, so distinct from rock, pop, country, folk, and indie. So what are we not covering? We're not going to look at jazz. We're not going to look at music theatre. We're not going to look at gospel. And these are all forms that we could look into. And let's not get even started on the subgenres of all of the genres that we're going to be looking at today. But I wanted to cover off on these 5 because I think they're possibly the most widely sung genres of my community. Please don't feel like you're not a part of the community if we're not looking at your specific genre today. You are a part of us, but these are the ones we're going to look at today. And as we go along, I'm going to be introducing you to some books. Oh, hang on a second. I haven't even done this. We need to do that. So we're going to be looking at some books as we go along, made available by the National Association for Teachers of Singing. That's the American sort of group for teachers of singing. But they're not written for teachers specifically, these books. They are written for singers of these genres. And the first book that we're reading here, and it's a book I'm very pleased to say I have read beginning to end. And in fact, Matthew Edwards, the author of this particular edition, this particular volume, because there's, I think, how many have I got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got 9 of these, and I think there might be a few more, but this has just gone to its 2nd edition, I believe. It's just been released. And Matthew, of course, has been on the show before, and this is a great read. And the reason this is not sponsored by Nats. I'm an Australian, remember? But I want to bring these books to your attention because they are so good, and not just for teachers, but for singers of the genre. So let's talk about rock music. Rock music originated in the 1950s, as we know. Let's not get our knickers in a twist over the exact dates. We could argue that for a little while. Around about the 1950s, and it's characterized by strong backbeat and simple chord progressions, and often revolves around the electric guitar. And I think that's why I love it so much. I love rock. I do. I love rock. So the key features are electric guitar riffs, strong backbeat, aggressive or rebellious themes, which is true, right? When we've got rock, part of that strong rhythmic drive comes from the messaging of the lyric. It's got that sort of to it, and a high energy and intensity. Good examples of rock: the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Queen. Though Queen, you could argue, do we put Queen with rock? I think certain parts of it we do. Foo Fighters, that would be another great example. Why don't you throw up your suggestions in the chat if you've got some suggestions of who you think other rock, and acknowledging that as we go through, and I mentioned some of these artists, a lot of these artists have done hybrids genre. They're not maybe only held to one genre. They often, for example, the Beatles, they didn't only do rock, right? They did explore other expressions. And so, let's not hold Dr. Dan to exact, what do you mean? Okay. Vocal characteristics of rock. And this is the part that we're all interested in, because for those of us who are driving at particular genres and developing in them, you want to pay attention to very specific areas within your voice. And as a result, that's going to then, inform your development of technique. So the first one for rock, powerful and dynamic vocals, obviously. So you're going to need a strength in your voice. It's going to need to be thyroarytenoid dominant, and you're going to need that musculature, that chest voice sound, to have real security and stability. And so belt is going to be a good aspect, and twang for that matter. There is going to be vocal distortion. Yeah, there's going to be some growl that's going to come from some of the aggression that drives the voice. And so you need to be able to do that safely, efficiently, in a healthy way. That all in part is going to be, informed by good breath management. No question. You are going to need good breath management to run that. And sustained notes, I wrote that down there because often a big part of vocal health comes from you being able to not only establish balance in your voice, but maintain that over extended phrases, extended notes, and keeping the balance. It's one thing to find balance on a slack line, for example, a slack rope or a tight rope, but then you've got to move on that, and that's a different skill again, right? So really important. What have we got here? The next one, pop music. And I grabbed this one here. This is edited by Matthew Hock. This is not so you want to sing pop per se. This is for CCM, contemporary commercial music, a term coined by Jeannie Levetri. I'm not a big fan of the CCM label. I prefer PCM, popular culture music's coined by Professor Diane Hughes. I think PCM describes more of what we do here, but nonetheless, that's a good read, and it really goes through a lot of, actually interviews, I think, from memory, 12 singing teachers who teach CCM, and they all talk to that. And part of that is pop music, and it's a genre that aims for a broad audience appeal, characterized by catchy melodies and simple chords, and often has a focus on commercial success. The quintessential pop singer at the moment would be Taylor Swift. If you said Taylor Swift, yes, Taylor Swift. She started out more country, didn't she, Taylor? But certainly these days we would say she's your quintessential pop. Think Madonna, think Michael Jackson, Britney Spears, Dua Lipa. You think more of Dua Lipa going sort of pop dance pop. And the key features of pop music, catchy hooks, choruses that, well, they're worm ears, the earworms, not worm ears, earworms. They get in your head and you can't get them out, even when you don't want them there. We drove, as you know, we went skiing it's a long time ago now, about a month ago, 5 weeks ago. And my daughter, my 16-year-old, she was playing a lot of Harry Styles, another pop artist, and quite a bit of Taylor Swift. And as much as it frustrated me, I wish we could have listened to something else. I did find myself singing the tunes because they're very, very catchy. Very catchy. Very simple structure. They're very accessible to the general populace. And so it's something that is important in you don't want to make your pop music too complicated because it'll probably take you down a different route. It's got mainstream appeal, and it often features electronic production. It's highly produced. And so things like your your auto tune is definitely being applied, as well as a whole heap of other electronic effects and features. Vocally, what do you want with your pop? You want it to be clear and clean. You don't want that, we're talking with rock, we want to lighten off the tone a little bit. You don't want it to be heavy and aggressive. You want it to have just a happy-go-lucky lightness, but the tone, you want to have it be really, really thick. There is an emphasis on pitch accuracy, and that is in part driven by just how much auto-tune is applied to what people are listening to in their everyday listening through Spotify and the likes. There is a growing emphasis on riffs and runs. If you were to go back to someone like Madonna and even Michael Jackson, you will hear riff and run, you will hear melisma, but nowhere near to the extent that we will hear it with some pop artists today. Mind you listen to a Taylor Swift and or a Harry Styles for that matter, you're not going to hear a tremendous amount of riffs and runs. So it is partly driven by the artist, but that agility vocally is something that you are going to want to develop. And that's why in the Voice Essentials, program, we cover off all of these things. I called Voice Essentials for a reason, because there are some key essential technical skills that you need to acquire in order to, go into this range of genres that we're looking at today. And finally, with pop music, you do want, and this is in keeping with the clear and clean vocals, you do want to have your tone to be smooth, and it's a rather smooth and polished vocal tone and a very smooth and polished delivery. I'm given to kind of furthering what I was saying before. There are exceptions to every single thing I'm saying today, and you will be able to apply an exception to every single point. But I'm really talking about the very run-of-the-mill, standardized ideas around each of these genres. So, by all means, think of the exceptions. That's cool. And sometimes it's the exceptions that cause certain artists to stand out in a particular genre. I don't want to take away from that. But equally, just know that we're talking to the rule here. Country music. Here's another book. So, and I'm actually reading this one right now. You can see I'm sort of nearly halfway through. Where's my bookmark? There's my bookmark. Isn't that cool? Can you see? Oh, I'm trying to get the bookmark in there. My kids gave me that bookmark many, many, many years ago. Anyway, so I'm halfway through this one at the moment. Really enjoying it. What I love about these books, because I've read many of them, not all of them. I bought them, kind of a whole heap of them at the same time, and then have just been slowly but surely working my way through them. What I love about these is it really goes into in far more depth what we're talking about today, and it really causes you to. She takes you down. Well, in this case, Kelly K. Garner takes you down the tributaries, the different subgenres of country, and identifies those attributes of the subgenres, not just the big overarching genre heading of country. I highly recommend these books. Okay, country music is a genre that originated in the southern United States, pretty much characterized by its storytelling, lyrics, acoustic instruments, and traditional themes. Key feature of country. And this is not to say that it's not a feature of other genres, but a key feature of country music is its storytelling. You know, it's got that sense of, you know, it's been lonely in my saddle since my horse died kind of feel. You know, they're always singing about a very specific story. And it's actually one of the features I love about country is that it's story time. You know, you really do get to hear a short story told in song. I love that about it. Use of acoustic guitars, fiddles, and banjos, and in fact, well, it's only got guitar there, but certainly it's a part, particularly fiddles and banjos, especially when you get into those subgenres. Themes of love, heartbreak, and rural life, and these are what drive that narrative. But yet pretty simple, straightforward melodies. One could argue perhaps even more simple and straightforward than pop. But in some respects, country music is the popular music of the rural areas of the US and certainly here in Australia, because that's what they listen to predominantly. So artists like, you know, Carrie Underwood, Luke Combs, Garth Brooks, going back to Dolly Parton, Johnny Cash. These are artists that, you know, epitomize the country. And so, and as I said, if I'm remembering correctly, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I'm fairly confident that Taylor started out much more country than where she's ended with pop. Let's continue with some of the vocal characteristics. Twangy and nasal vocal characteristics and qualities, differentiating between those two. We've talked a lot about twang and nasality here on the channel. There are videos on the channel, teaching videos on the channel that you can go and check out. So be sure to do that. But remembering that and it's not just D-I-V-O-R-C with my man today. It's not just that, yeah, which we kind of caricature country with. No, it's far more nuanced, and that's why twang as opposed to nasality is such an important attribute, because you can mold the tone of twang more so than nasality. Clear diction and articulation, that is in part driven by the fact that it's so story-based. If you as a country artist are not being clearly heard from a diction point of view, then it kind of undermines what you're there to do, and that is tell stories. If your audience aren't picking up on the narrative, then, you know, you're just making a happy sound. Emphasis on emotional expression, because a big part of storytelling is the emotive drive of the story, right? It's been lonely in my saddle since my horse died. Well, there's a lot of loss in that, isn't there? Tongue in cheek. And featured transitions between registers. And so we hear in country a real dexterity between transitions, but not just smooth, but sometimes highlighting and actually not yodeling, though that it can be a part of country if you take a particular very, very niche area. No, it actually is about being able to use it as a vocal effect. And so that agility of registration, again, which we cover off in Voice Essentials. Voice Essentials, well, we really, from Voice Essentials 1 right through 3, we look at registration. So it's important for you. It's good management of your registration is not simply being able to smooth it out so you don't hear the transitions. It's being in command of the transitions and being able to make them do what you want them to do. And again, that's going to be in part driven at times by your, what am I talking about? I lost my train of thought. It's going to be driven by your genre of choice. That's where I was headed. Okay, folk music. Yeah, there's a whole book on folk. Here we go. And can I tell you, I haven't read this one yet. I'm looking forward to reading it. It's on my list of books to read. And you can see it's got a fiddle there, an acoustic guitar. Folk music is a genre that focuses on traditional music and storytelling. Storytelling again, yeah. Often passed down through generations and characterized by its acoustic instrumentation. I've got some friends in California, actually very good friends of my wife, Jody, and they are professional. Well, I'm calling them folk, but they probably are more nuanced in what the style they refer to. The Jeffersons, and they do a lot of work in this sort of field. Let's talk about the key features. Some of the key characteristics, some of the key artists that you might like to be thinking about. Let's think Bob Dylan. Yeah, Simon and Garfunkel. Kind of different to Bob Dylan, but I would think Simon and Garfunkel, Mumford and Sons. These are good examples of your folk. So, I mean, Mumford and Sons almost goes folk rock, right? So, acoustic instruments like guitar, banjo, harmonica, a whole range of different rhythmic instruments would be applied in folk. Traditional and historical themes. Yeah, so it really, again, this is going to come down to the subgenres that you are going into is going to determine the kind of, because you're going to get your kind of national-driven folk. Then you're going to just get your more widely listened to folk music that you'll find, readily listened to on Spotify. Simple and repetitive song structures. And often the real skill in folk music is very much, and again, you could say this of every genre, is very much driven by the music, the music that's sitting behind the singing of these, and the focus on lyrical content and storytelling again. And in many respects, country is a form of folk because it kind of came out of that music out of lived experience in a particular place. Vocal characteristics, and this is really, really interesting. It's folk is a very natural and untrained vocal tone. And you might go, if you're into folk, you might go, oh, that's great. That lets me off the hook. I don't have to worry about technique. It's a funny thing. It takes a lot of skill to sound untrained in a sustainable, efficient way. And it's an interesting thing how important it is to develop your technique to be able to sound natural and untrained. I'm thinking of a singer right now who is one of my wife's favorite singers, and now that I'm saying her, she's right there and I cannot think of her name. My wife will kill me because she sings whenever I come home to Jody working, if she's ever doing some cooking on a Sunday afternoon or something, she'll always be playing this artist, and now I can't think of her name. She's an Aussie, and she's very folk pop. Missy Higgins, I knew it would come. Missy Higgins is a really good example of an Australasian, an Australian type of folk kind of sort of pop sort of sound. She has a very definite emphasis on clear storytelling. It's one of the things I think my wife loves about her. Joni Mitchell might be another good example of this kind of singing. Very simple, but very direct vocal delivery. They're not trying to impress you with their voice, folk singers. And in fact, I think for folk singing, we want to maintain that rawness, that authentic nature of the sound to ensure that we have a really clear, that the audience has really clear access to the story. And all that, any sense of pretension is very intentionally removed. And of course, we use a lot of harmony and group singing. And that's, that, again, you could apply that to a lot of the genres we're looking at today. But that's certainly the case in this one. And now, I want to now have a look at a fifth one, and I'm going to list it as its own category, its own genre, indie. But I think you could, in one sense, you could say that indie is a subgenre of pretty much every other genre, kind of. Though I am going to kind of separate it out and talk about some of its features. Now, it is a genre that encompasses a diverse range of styles and is often characterized by its independent, non-mainstream production and artistic freedom. So it's very much about what drives indie is its desire to decouple itself from that mass production. The irony of that is it often then becomes mass produced by virtue of its, just its following. There are a lot of people that love indie, me being one of them. It has an emphasis on artistic expression and originality, driven in part. Often what drives indie production is that production houses want to play it safe. They, a production house, they're often putting money on the table, and so they want to play it safe. Whereas an indie artist goes, well, I don't want to play it safe. I want to be expressive. I want to, I don't want to be shackled to the dollar. I want to create what I want to create in the way that I want to create it, and that is what drives the feature. It will have such a diverse instrumentation, and indie artists often really pride themselves on the inclusion of the most random and left of field instruments. As we're talking about this, good examples of indie would be the Smiths, Arctic Monkeys I've written down here, Florence and the Machine, Tame Impala. These are all artists that have kind of got this, this is how I'm going to do it. Regina Spektor, these sorts of artists. It's often very experimental. It's often very unconventional, like a Tori Amos. And the vocals that come out of that are often very experimental as well. And it's got a very do-it-yourself ethic and independent production, again, driven by the fact that often that's how indie music gets produced. There's got to have this sort of self-drive behind it. And what's going to drive that is a very unique and individual vocal style. And I think this is one of the reasons I love indie so much, is that you get to hear such a wonderful diversity of vocal sound. No one's trying to sound like anyone else. They're not trying to, they're purposefully looking to sound very unique, very individualized, very identifiable, a very distinct vocal signature. And it's what I do enjoy about it. It's often very raw, very unpolished, like folk, right? But again, it's still got to be healthy, sustainable, and efficient. And it takes a lot of skill to sound raw and unpolished, but yet have underneath that a technical foundation that keeps the voice secure. Because no matter what your genre, there are going to be times when you have to perform sick. There are going to be times where you are just vocally fatigued. And it's at those times and many others where your technique is going to be so important in carrying the day. It's emotional. It's often got very, authentic expression, and out of that comes a lot of very raw vocal effects that are very primal in their sound. And breath, not just breath management, but breath is often used as a facility of expression. And again, that could be said of pretty much everything we've talked about today as we've explored genres. Let me take you through. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've got something out of it, and it further refines your ideas around these different genres, and maybe gives you some ideas as to what you can next work on in your overall sound. Let me show you some of the other books that we've got here. So this is one that I have read. This is So You Want to Sing in a Lifetime. This is one that I haven't read yet, the music theatre one. Jazz. So You Want to Sing Jazz. I have read this cover to cover. This is the gospel one. This one's from our friend Tracey Robinson Martin. Remember, we have Tracey come on. In fact, we're going to be having Tracey come on the channel again soon. So Tracey, I've read that cover to cover. But the other one I haven't read is this one, The Blues, which is, comes out of, a really strong cultural heritage in the US. So there you go. I mean, when you read these books, and I want to encourage you, good learning to sing is not just, though it needs to be, it's not just developing your technique. You have to listen. You have to immerse yourself in a said genre. Have a listen to the iconic voices and music of that genre. Understand the subgenres, and in part you can do that by reading, and these are great texts, not only as just the first test. For example, if you're looking to get into country, have a read of a book like this, and then out of that book you'll find there's other books that are referenced, other readings, and you go, reading, why would I want to read? Well, because it informs you. I still remember when I was at uni, a lot of us as young people, we would bemoan the fact that we had to do history. Like, I just want to sing. I just want to play. But as I've matured, as I've gotten a bit older, I've started to understand the importance of learning from history, understanding what informs, what are the pillars of a genre historically. Why do we sing with a clear tone in pop? Well, these are all the questions that can be answered when you do a little bit more research beyond just the listening and beyond your own singing. And so I hope that's been a helpful deep dive today. I enjoyed putting that together for everyone, so I'm hoping that you've enjoyed that as much as I did. Would Missy Higgins be in? I've just seen a statement from Linda saying, would Missy Higgins be indie? I think some of her stuff, I would have to say it is, Linda, but like a lot of artists, they do branch out, right? And do quite a few different things. And so, as a person who not endures, that would have been I actually quite like some of Missy's later stuff. I really enjoy, and I've listened to a lot of Missy Higgins because my wife, as I said, loves Missy. Okay, so let's get into today's. I see a question here, and I'm only gonna get to two. I'm going to get to two questions. Rebecca has written here, I recently heard a worship leader sing just like Elton John. It was absolutely incredible. Dr. Dan, where does Elton John sing from? Cannot figure out his vocal placement. Well, that's an interesting question. It depends on whether you are talking about Elton John pre-80s or post-80s, because Elton had I'm pretty sure it was was it a vocal fold hemorrhage or I think it was a hemorrhage that happened actually here in Australia, and while he was on tour, and he had to very much change where he was placing. So if you listen to very early, there's quite a bit of shouty man about. There was very cool sounding shouty man about Elton John's singing. And yet when he's gotten older and I think had to maybe adjust the application of his voice, I think the placement became a little bit more refined, a little less pressure that was driving the voice. And that's just me thinking off the top of my head and bringing to mind his vocal sounds. But if you listen to sort of, 70s and early 80s Elton, Rocket Man and those sorts of going even further back, you are going to hear quite a pressurized sound, if that makes sense. And Kelly got the second question in. Dr. Dan, how does one develop the country twang? How is it different from the twang exercises and voice essentials 1? It's going to depend on the sub-genre, Kelly. And so country twang is going to allow some nasalizing of the twang. Remember, twang is not, firstly, it's not nasality. It's a shaping of what's called the supraglottic space, the laryngopharynx. And it's all in where that shaped sound, which happens immediately above the vocal folds, is directed. And so if you direct all of that through the nasal cavity, you're going to get a highly nasalized sound like a Tammy Wynette. But you don't have to only drive it only through the nose. You can drive it through the mouth, where you can shape and color the tone. And so it's going to come down to the type of country that you want to sing as to, how much twang is going to have. So, for example, a Keith Urban, who is a country rock artist, you'll hear quite a bit of twang in that sound, but it's not what you'd call heavily nasalized twang. And so, depending on the type of subgenre is going to give you that answer. I'll do one more question. Bradley Munro, the Music Man. Does Christmas music utilize all the genres of music? Well, yeah, I think every genre has its Christmas songs, and you probably could allocate a whole heap of different songs. Like, for example, you could even go as far as saying, is Disney tunes, okay? Is that pop? Is it music theatre? You could almost allocate like an easy listening kind of zone, which is really going to be a hybrid of a whole heap of other things. And so music probably falls into a not dissimilar sort of sort of classification. I don't know that you could, you certainly wouldn't give it its own thing, despite the fact that, Michael Bublé and Mariah Carey get more plays during Christmas than in any other, well, certainly in this house, than any other time. That wasn't kind to Michael Bublé. Michael Bublé deserves a lot of high rotation in any household, in my humble opinion. I think he's amazing. But he does get wheeled out at Christmas a lot, right? He does. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's mini topic. I didn't spend all of the session today going through that, but we covered a lot of ground. We covered a lot of ground. I hope that you found that interesting. And I've just seen Sharon Fox. I love Elton. Yeah, I love his songwriting. I got to say, I do enjoy Elton, Rocket Man. Yeah, I do enjoy Elton's songwriting. Next week, we're going to do a full Q&A. In fact, we've got quite a few backlog of, Q&A questions for me to get to. So, worst comes to worst, next week when we get together for Q&A, we're going to cover off on that. And that'll be good. There you go. I hope you've enjoyed today's live hangout. I hope you've enjoyed the topic. I hope it inspires you to think about your voice in relationship, excuse me, in relationship to the genre that you're passionate about. And I hope it inspires you to sing with more passion for that. I very much look forward to seeing you in the next live hangout next week. I'll see you again soon. I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.